You're listening to the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway, on WBAI, serving New York and the tri-state area.
People of America, this is the President of the United States. You are listening to George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. George is a Scotsman, and like me, an Irishman. Enjoy.
Although I'm only half a Scotsman, in fact, I'm half Scottish, half Irish, with a rather more plausible claim than President Obama. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in for the returning mother of all talk shows on WBAI. I've missed you. I hope you've missed me. And above all, I've missed Aoife, who is the person who makes this radio show possible. Without her, there would be no calls, and we wouldn't be able to handle this tricky transition between my studio in dull, humid London town and your apparently rather wet New York City, not to mention the rest of the tri-state area. I'm here to talk to you, to give you the benefit or otherwise of my point of view on the great issues of the day and to listen to yours. The telephone number to call me on is 212-209-2900. That's 212-209-2900. Now, of course, you don't need me to tell you that we're in the run-up to the 10th anniversary of the massive atrocity visited on the people of New York and elsewhere in 2001. It changed many things in the world. It certainly changed life for the people of New York, who had a couple of buildings that were so iconic that no vista of New York was possible without their representation, and it lost almost 3,000 people. 3,000 innocent men and women. 3,000 innocent people who included heroes of the fire department and other emergency services who gave their lives trying to save others. It was a monumental crime. It was a sin in any religion. It was a crime in any language. It was not the biggest terrorist atrocity that had ever taken place, as we are frequently enjoined to believe, but who wants to get into a numbers game on a crime as vast as that? Neither was it the first terrorist atrocity, as we are sometimes enjoined to believe. But let's not haggle either about that. It wasn't even the first 9/11, because, of course, on 9/11, 1973, the United States President, Richard Nixon, the crook, the man who disgraced the office more than any other before or since, and his equally crooked mass murderer, Henry Kissinger, who the last time I looked was still at large and still earning large sums of money from giving the benefit of his wisdom, presided over a military coup in Chile, which overthrew the elected socialist government of Salvador Allende with the death of the president, many members of parliament, many thousands of supporters of his popular unity government, and the torture and disappearance of many tens of thousands of others, including nuns from the local Roman Catholic Church, tortured on torture tables in Santiago Stadium after 9/11, 1973. So there have been other 9/11s, there have been other atrocities, there have been even bigger atrocities. But none of that is to undervalue the significance and the pain, indeed agony, suffered by New York on 9/11, 2001. I watched it live on television. Some of you will have watched it live in actuality. By the time the second plane had hit the Twin Towers, I was already writing a piece for the next morning's Guardian newspaper. It was reprised this week by Seamus Milne in The Guardian. Can be read by going to The Guardian website. It was entitled Reaping the Whirlwind. In it, I argued that though these aeroplanes appeared to emerge from a clear blue sky, in fact they had emerged from a swamp of hatred and bitterness towards us felt in the Muslim world 1.6 billion people strong. And out of that 1.6 billion, I argued, hundreds of millions hated us because of our double standards, because of our injustice, because of our complicity in the crimes against the Palestinian people, because of our complicity in the propping up of tyrants, puppet presidents, and corrupt kings who ruled the Muslim world then as now, almost without exception, from one end to the other. I argued that this terrorist atrocity, which was carried out against the people of New York, if we handled it the wrong way, we'd make 10,000 new bin Ladens. And I believe that everything I said in print and in the Houses of Parliament at that time have been vindicated by events. We did handle them the wrong way, and we do live in a world even more dangerous today than it was 10 years ago. I'm sure that the program will be dominated by this subject, but of course there are others involving New York. On the 20th of this month, the Palestinian National Authority will seek to obtain recognition of its declaration of a Palestinian state. Not very controversial, you might argue, given that President Obama already declared in favor of this, though he's changed his mind. Not that controversial if you think that it's getting on for 20 years since the Oslo Agreement was signed with such pomp and ceremony on the White House lawn, and nothing actually has happened ever since. So the Palestinians, tiring of this miasma of talks, this endless process leading to no peace, have decided to take matters into their own hand, and they need, I think it's 120 countries to vote for them, and they're closing in very fast on that number. However, your president, yes, President Barack Obama, the man who used to sit at the feet of the late and great Professor Edward Said, the man who knows more about Palestine than any American president has ever done, has promised that whatever the United Nations General Assembly votes for, however much the Palestinian and Arab and Muslim world has invested in this drive for recognition, that your country will veto any Palestinian state declaration. And yet, you know this, there are still some people in the United States who don't understand why so many Muslims hate your country and its government. Just forget all the other crimes and just focus on that one. When President Obama casts the veto against Palestinian statehood in the Security Council, which may have been voted for by well over 120 countries in the world, including many of America's closest allies. When President Obama casts that veto, ask yourself, does that make America safer in the world or not? Does that make America more loved in the world or not? Well, to me, it's kind of obvious. Let's hear what you've got to say. Aoife, do we have any calls on the line?
Yes, you do. Starting with Dr. Block from Paterson, New Jersey.
Paterson, New Jersey.
Hello.
Yes, hello,
hello,
Doctor. How are you?
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I teach at William Patterson State University, and I enjoy you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I hope you won't mind, but I listened last week, and there was one person who said, well, it could have been an inside job at 9/11, and you defended, as far as I know, not that point of view, but the opposite by saying
yes, that's right, yeah.
Be that cruel. Well, when I was...
No, I didn't say that, Doctor. I'd never say George Bush couldn't be that cruel.
Well, I meant that the government, you didn't feel the government was involved.
Yeah, but not because... but here's the point. Not because I don't think they're cruel enough. They're much crueler than that. They've done much worse than that. That's not my reason for rejecting the common conspiracy theories. But anyway, go ahead, Doctor.
Well, I remember years ago reading in the Congressional Record. Now, I don't know, the Congressional Record does not reveal its sources. It doesn't say what its primary or secondary. But I do remember in the 1960s, there was some person in Congress who was talking about the British oil companies in World War II. And this person said that the Mobil Corporation knew very well what it was doing when it sold oil to the Luftwaffe, which then used the oil to bomb London. And
sounds like something from Catch-22. Did you read Catch-22?
No.
Catch-22 is one of the great 20th century novels, and in it, the character Milo Minderbender actually rents out his own Air Force planes to the Germans to bomb his own camp on the principle that business is business. And if there's profit to be made, hey, why not? We can always dig our hole deeper. That's just an observation.
The reason that I mention that is that to me, if it was true, then it reveals something that is very cruel. That even though the United States didn't plan this 9/11, if for those in power who knew about it and allowed it to happen, it certainly could be an excuse to enter into Afghanistan and commit terrible crimes for which we pay. And
to be honest, Doctor, there's no difference between us on this question. Let me recap on where I stand on this, which you'll find touches your position quite neatly. There's no doubt at all that 9/11 was used by the fanatics around the president, the fanatics of the project for the new American century, who wanted a new Pearl Harbor to bring about the circumstances in which they could go to war with the world, and in that what they described as creative chaos, in that crucible, tried to reforge the world in a way, in a shape that would be helpful to United States interests. There is no question at all about that. There is no question at all that the United States government, or the British government for that matter, would be capable of summoning the levels of cruelty involved in committing a false flag operation. Many such false flag operations have taken place in the past. Anyone who's read Graham Greene's The Quiet American or seen the rather inferior movie starring Michael Caine by the same name could see there the false flag operations in Vietnam carried out by special forces of the United States for the obvious political purpose of propaganda, of turning people against other people, of justifying, validating a course of action which the state would like to pursue. No question at all about that. The United States government openly canvassed, and it's there in documented form, doing something with aeroplanes in relation to Cuba at the height of the period in which they were embarked on a full-scale, multi-layered, multi-dimensional terrorist campaign against the government of Cuba. There's no doubt that they're cruel enough, no doubt that they could think up a false flag operation. My reason for not believing the commonly held conspiracy theories, especially commonly held in the United States, I must say, which tells you something about the deadly blow to the credibility of systems, political and governmental systems in the West, of what has happened over the last decade, is this, entirely practical, that I saw the two airplanes hitting the Twin Towers, so I'm not in any doubt that two airliners hit the Twin Towers. I'm not in any doubt that those airliners had passengers on board. I'm not in any doubt that those airliners were hijacked and flown into the towers. Therefore, I cannot see what conceivable purpose there would be in also dynamiting the towers. The casus belli was the towers being smashed into by the two airliners. That was all you needed to create a casus belli. You didn't need to actually take the risk and involve the numbers of people who would have to be involved in dynamiting these two twin towers and bringing them down. It's my view that such a conspiracy would have to involve far too large a number of individuals for the state or any elements of the state to be prepared to take the risk of disclosure. And lastly, because the price of disclosure would be absolute and total destruction of the political party involved in the crime and indeed the political system which had made the crime possible. And that was too high a price to be paid. And it didn't need to be paid. Bush could have done everything he subsequently did, at least abroad, without even the airplanes hitting the Twin Towers, never mind the Twin Towers also falling. There was no need to pay that huge price in blood and risk in order to get the casus belli that he, or at least people around him, would have required. Because if revealed, the Republican Party would be dead and buried and forever. An entire political wing of the state would have been negated in absolute, total, historical disgrace for all time. There would never again, ever be a Republican ever elected to anything. Indeed, there might not be a democratic political system with all its limitations even in existence after the revelation that a Republican president had committed this crime against his own people in order to, what? To invade Afghanistan? Have you seen Afghanistan? Can you imagine there's any prize in Afghanistan that would be worth that risk? I just don't buy it, Doctor. But thanks for the call. 212-209-2900. That's the number to call. Aoife, do we have another?
Yes, you have John from Yonkers.
John in Yonkers, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, well, it's not John. That's what I use to get online. But
okay, go on. Whoever you are.
The angry brother.
Oh, not you again. No, not you again. Off you go. No, you're red card, mate. I don't want to talk to you. Aoife, give me a third call, please.
Okay, gotcha. This is Jason. Jason from Queens Village.
Jason in Queens Village, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yes, thank you very much, and I apologize for the quality of my line. It sounds pretty bad.
Very good. It's very clear to me, and I'm in London.
Okay, good. That's good. And big up to Aoife because she's holding it down. She really is.
She's fabulous, man. Without her, there's no show.
All right, let me get on with my question. I don't want to take up too much time. In light of the so-called Arab Spring and the international response to tyranny in many of its forms, what are your thoughts on the rebellion in England where the participants were referred to as feral rats?
I don't know if they were called feral rats. They were certainly called feral, and some of them were feral. And I don't think it can be described as a rebellion. I don't think it's a rebellion when a young Muslim boy from Malaysia who's fasting for Ramadan is set upon by a group of youths who break his jaw, smash him to the ground, and then open the rucksack on his back and take his worldly goods, including the water and the dates that he was going to break his fast with. I don't think it's a rebellion when a 68-year-old pensioner, old-age pensioner, is battered to death on the streets of West London because he tried to put out a fire that had been started in a garbage container. I don't think it's a rebellion when you burn your neighbor's house, forcing them to leap from an upstairs window to avoid incineration. I don't think it's a rebellion when you go into a small shop run by a family of immigrants who work as long as the day is in order to just get by and trash their shop and steal everything from it. I don't count that as a rebellion. But in one respect, neither was it what these who described the youths as feral. Neither was that correct. Because this was a series of crimes, but it was not only a series of crimes. It was also a reflection of the fact that in England we have a neo-conservative government, and indeed had one before the change of government, which called itself New Labour, but was in fact neoconservative in its economic policy and imperialist in its foreign policy, have laid waste to huge sections of our country and left derelict millions of our people in post-industrial squalor, without hope, without jobs, without education, without training, without any kind of perspective on how their lives could be even as good as their parents' life had been, and that wasn't that great. This is the first generation of young people in British history, I'm talking all of British history, who cannot look forward to a better life than their parents had, who are actually looking down the barrel of a life worse than their parents enjoyed, and who knows what their children in turn would have to face. But thanks for your call. In Yonkers, 212-209-2900. Ife, next one, please.
Yes, you have Alan from New York.
Alan in New York, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yes, hi. This is a long-time admirer of yours, first-time caller.
Thank you, sir.
I wanted to ask you a question because I admire your experience and prediction. What do you think that is going to happen to Iran? The future of Iran in general, number one, and do you think there is a possible attack from Israel or United States? Not that there is much difference because they work hand in hand. I'm driving, so I'm going to hang up and listen to you. If it's
excellent. Thanks very much for the call. I don't think there's any realistic possibility of an attack upon Iran, not by the United States, and it's hard to believe, although the tail sometimes seems to wag the dog, that the United States could conceivably permit Israel to use weapons which America gave it and wealth which American taxpayers continue to pour into it, to launch such an attack which would have such devastating results for the United States and for the region and the world. So I don't believe that there is a likely military attack, not least because Iran is too strong to be militarily attacked. For the same reason that North Korea cannot be attacked, Iran cannot be attacked. We only attack countries that can't attack us back. And Iran's very, very definitely not in that category. However, it's clear that the policy of belligerent hostility towards Iran, towards the Islamic system there, will continue. It will be multi-layered, will involve helping secessionist terrorist organizations. There's a row at the moment because the BBC Farsi service, which is, of course, heavily influenced by the British Foreign Office and the British state, conducted a sweetheart interview with a terrorist group seeking secession for a part of Iran, namely Iranian Baluchistan. This happened just in the last couple of days. So there will be special forces, maybe. There will be special subvention of money for vociferous tendencies within Iran. There will be support for anti-government, anti-regime movements within Iran. There will be economic sanctions and social ostracism will be attempted against Iran. And all of that, of course, will have its attritional value. We'll have to see which is stronger, the adherence of the people of Iran to an independent and sovereign state, and the determination of the Western countries to, through attrition, bring it down. I hope that answers your point. 212-209-2900, that's my number. Ife is taking the calls. Ife, do we have another?
Yes, you have Ray from Manhattan on the line right now.
Hi, Ray. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Go ahead.
I have two questions. Number one, what's your opinion about Mr. Zardari, President Zardari, and his late wife, Ms. Bhutto, And where are we going in Pakistan with all this CIA and all these things, where Pakistan is going? And I'll take my answer off the line, please.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, the late Benazir Bhutto was a close friend of mine, a personal friend of mine from her arrival in London in the early 1980s until her death by assassination in Pakistan. We were close friends. I spoke to her regularly. I corresponded with her regularly. I spent a lot of time with her in London and indeed in Pakistan. I believe that she was a heroic figure who made many mistakes, no doubt, but a brave, heroic figure, bright, brave, and beautiful. B, I always called her. And I miss her terribly. I was never a particular friend of her husband, now President Asif Zardari. I have met him, of course. But as Benazir used to always say, people split my friends into before Asif and after Asif, and I was very definitely in the before Asif category. He is, of course, the elected president of Pakistan. The job is inherently difficult. Pakistan is a dreadfully poor place, which is blighted by two things in particular. Though three, I think we'd have to expand it to three now. But the first two are its massive, bloated, military, parasitical suction on the national wealth. Something like 60% of all the wealth of Pakistan is sucked by a military brass who have so many medals on their uniforms they can hardly stand up straight, though they've never fought, most of them, and never won a single war. It's hard to see what these medals are for, but they are certainly very proficient at sucking the blood of the people. They own banks, they own enterprises, businesses, huge lands, apartment blocks. They are effectively a military-industrial complex which dominates the state. And the number one criticism that I would make of Benazir's late father, not her because she was never strong enough to do it, but her late father, the martyr, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who did have the political power in the 1970s, should have broken the back of this military caste, which has continued to not only suck the blood of the nation, but regularly to overthrow the democratic governments and kill or imprison their leaders. Half of Pakistan's life has been spent under military rule. The second problem that it has is debt. And if you add the expenditure on the military and the expenditure on servicing the debt, actually Pakistan has to play with, to spend on the benefit of its people, less than 20%. So more than 80% of Pakistan's wealth goes on paying debts incurred in part by military juntas, and including debts for huge mountains of weapons and the military costs themselves. So it's very, very difficult to achieve anything in Pakistan. If you add a third problem to that, the problem of a war, an international war raging in the country next door, one which since the early 1980s has had its effect on poisoning the polity in Pakistan, since the beginning of the Western offensive against Afghanistan in its previous guise as a socialist country, and continuing until now, then between the war and the debt and the military, well, I don't know who could govern Pakistan properly. I don't know if it can be governed properly in these circumstances. I guess Asif Ali Zardari is doing his best. I'm not in touch with him. I'm not advising him, and he's certainly not explaining himself to me. But as someone who loves Pakistan, who holds the two highest civil awards in Pakistan, as I do, the Hilal-e-Qaid-e-Azam and the Hilal-e-Pakistan, for my work on the restoration of democracy in Pakistan in the 1980s, and my work for the people of Kashmir over the last 30 years, my heart bleeds for Pakistan. So, 212-209-29 That's the number to call. Ife, do we have another?
Yes, and George, this one, he said he's the real John from Connecticut, not the
real John from Connecticut. Okay, John, welcome.
Welcome, George. I have a couple of questions, and they're a little involved, so bear with me.
Okay.
I want to start with the Webster's definition of conspiracy. It's two or more individuals colluding for a nefarious purpose.
Yep.
And nefarious is further explained as unspeakably wicked.
Yep.
And I want to go to...
I know the meaning of nefarious.
I want to go to 775 in London, the day of the attacks on the British Underground, and I want to go to the fact that Giuliani, that would be the former mayor of New York, was a paid consultant to a British group that was running a counterterrorism exercise, and the head of that group was the ex-head of the Metropolitan Police Department, and he was interviewed by BBC, and in the interview, the quote from him was, "The hair on the back of my neck stood up when I realized it was no longer an exercise." And what he was referring to was a 1,000-man exercise run by him in the 4 subway stations that actually took the bomb blasts. And I want to also bring in the fact that Netanyahu...
No, before you go off that subject,
right.
Can I ask you, John?
Netanyahu was also in London that day.
Okay, John, I need to stop you there. I want to ask you, John, I need to stop you there because I want to ask you something. Is it your point that Mayor Giuliani, in conspiracy with Benjamin Netanyahu, blew up and killed 55 Londoners on 7/7?
It is absolutely not my inference. I just wish, because the British government, even after the Menzies incident where an innocent man was shot dead by British undercover anti-terrorist squad, that question about the 1,000-man exercise has never been addressed.
Well, that's not true. You see, one of the problems, John, with these conspiracy theories is that they always prove the old adage that a little knowledge is dangerous. Not only have those questions been asked, I asked them. I asked them in the British Parliament. Many people have asked them in the British Parliament. There was an exercise going on. It was not going on in the 4 underground stations in which the explosions took place. It was going on entirely throughout the underground network, which of course includes those 4 stations, but the way you chose to put it implied that the exercise was in the 4 stations where the explosions took place. Now, John, I'll let you back in a minute.
Okay.
The people who blew up the 55 dead people, dead, innocent people, I'm asking you to picture them in your mind now, lying there bleeding without their limbs, without their heads. The people who maimed hundreds made martyrdom videos in which they told us why they had blown themselves up and all these other people. Why not believe them?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
I'm not saying there shouldn't be a disparity here, George. What I'm saying is the questions you may have asked, I certainly was not party to what you asked in the Parliament, but I have never seen an examination, either an official examination or not, even after the Menzies killing, which in itself was a very strange thing. And
there's been unending inquiries into that, John. John, right. the murder of Jean-Charles de Menezes, the Brazilian electrician, who was shot dead a week later because officers believed he was a terrorist, and they pinned him to the ground and put, I think, 5 bullets into his head when he was an entirely innocent man, and then slandered him afterwards, has been the subject of never-ending inquiry in Britain. Inquiry after inquiry after inquiry has taken place on this.
Did they figure it out?
Yes, they figured it out. They figured it out in the British way, that it was a cock-up, that a series of mistakes, each in itself explicable, led to an inexplicable end, that an innocent man was cruelly murdered at the hands of the state. But to imagine there's been no inquiry into it proves my point that a little knowledge is dangerous. There's been almost a constant inquiry into it since the day that it happened.
Well, George, let's move on to a couple of other questions. You answered that eloquently. Let me move on to some other more current things.
Go ahead.
Turkey, as you know, has now kicked out most of the Israeli diplomatic staff from Ankara and has asked everybody below, I think, a second secretary at the consular level to leave the country, and that includes the Israeli military attaché.
Yep.
And the relations between Turkey and Israel seem to be going to an all-time low, with Turkey now saying that next time a flotilla wants to run the Gaza blockade, Turkey may well provide military escorts in the form of warships. I want you to answer what you think about that.
Yeah.
Also,
well, Turkey didn't say that. A Turkish official, unnamed, was quoted in Haaretz, the Israeli press, as saying that. That is not the declared position of the Turkish government. I wish it was, and I don't believe that it will be. However, Turkey has taken the action you described and is going to take more. Davutoglu, the foreign minister of Turkey, a very estimable, admirable man, is in Egypt at the end of this week, and my guess is he will either cross over into Gaza or is there to prepare a visit later in the month by the Erdogan, the Turkish Prime Minister himself, to Egypt and thence over the border into Gaza. I believe that one or both of those will actually happen. I don't believe that the Turkish diplomatic and military relations with Israel will be reinstated. I believe that the freeze in relation to Turkish-Israeli relations will continue, and it's little wonder. Israel murdered 9 Turks a year and a bit ago on the 31st of May of 2010. One of them, by the way, an American citizen, though I have yet to see a single thing that the American state has had to say on behalf of its citizen who was murdered by Israel on board the Mavi Marmara. 9 Turks, one of them a Turkish-American, were murdered. Defenseless, unarmed, humanitarian activists were murdered by Israel, which refuses to apologize for the crime, refuses to compensate the families of the lost for that crime, and, moreover, the stooge inquiry set up by Ban Ki-moon, though not by the Security Council, and it has no more weight than the fact it was set up by the Secretary General, which is bad enough, but doesn't make it official, has actually said that the Israeli blockade of Gaza is legal. This flies in the face of all the United Nations rules and regulations and articles. So the one thing Turkey is definitely going to do is take this to the International Court to obtain a definitive legal ruling as to whether or not this siege is legal or not. Lastly, John, on this point, I myself and my friends are launching another convoy to Gaza, which we hope will sail on the Mavi Marmara from Istanbul to Alexandria in Egypt, where it will receive a tumultuous welcome, I have no doubt, and then drive across Egypt in a huge column, being the biggest convoy to enter Gaza. We're determined not to forget Gaza, and if you want to know more about that, go to vivapalestina.org. John, last point.
My last point quickly is to announce that the arrest of the NASA scientist in the United States, finally after a 2-year investigation, Mr. Nozet, was convicted of espionage for giving NASA and Department of Energy information, including national defense information, to the Israelis, to an FBI agent posing as an Israeli. And it seems that Ban Ki-moon notwithstanding, this Mr. Nozet was also the discoverer of water on the moon. And as usual, NASA throws out these wonderful high-resolution photographs of the moon at the same time that Mr. Nozet's conviction announcement arises. And I wonder if this is dilution of the story to further impede America's understanding of the true loyalties of some of the Israelis that work in the U.S. government. I'll end it there. Thank you,
Well,
George.
thanks, John. That was a pretty eloquent call, I must say. I don't know anything about the last point you made. I don't know that case at all. I have no doubt that Israel has espionage agents in the United States. I doubt if NASA put out pictures of water on the moon in order to dilute the story. Sounds like a watery myth to me, but I could be wrong about that. I've no doubt that Israel tries to get even more out of its relationship with the United States than it currently gets. But hey, that's just greedy, because Israel gets so much already, officially and legally, from the government and taxpayers of the United States. You'd think they'd be satisfied with what they've got. Thanks, John, for the call. 212-209-2900. That's the number to call. Aoife, do we have another?
Yes, you have KJ from Queens.
KJ from Queens, welcome to the show.
Yes, well, it's my probably fourth time visiting, and welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
I believe that John was making the point that the scientists had discovered water on the moon, and at the time of his arrest, they put up images of the moon to obfuscate the issue of whether or not people, that's the point. I caught that, I believe, correctly. Mm-hmm. However, our initial onslaught of you coming on the air would be, I said I wouldn't try to convince you of 9/11, and I'm not trying to. But for the sake of edification and commemoration of this hard event, I would have to say, you argued earlier that the reason why it seems it's just overkill in the nature that it could be conspiratorial. They didn't have to go that far. We all witnessed 2 planes going. That was terror enough. Innocent lives were killed who were on the plane alone. However, I would argue, and I take this perspective, that cabal, that those members who affected this, and I would put Dick Cheney and the members of PNAC and members who had a particular philosophical and ideological framework for why they thought it was necessary, was that they were not looking for any continuity in the democratic government. That's why they brought in, the laws to essentially oppress the American people from any reaction. I think they were prepared to go to the extreme. And I believe that, well, I won't even get to belief, but I'll just say from the point of constructively that this group was fairly irrational. They didn't care so much about conspiracy. It would be instructive, I would suggest, for you or for those who are listening, that listen to Joe Wilson's his interview with Al Jazeera, and in which he discusses that it being outed, which they went so far as to out the CIA, wasn't his wife, was the intent to suppress any other members who were part of the secrecy of government, the security of government, to not come forward.
Yeah.
These guys
you've missed my point, brother. My point is that if they had been revealed to have done this, if Vice President Dick Cheney of the Republican Party had been revealed, caught, having done this, it would be the end, not just of democracy, it would be the end of the Republican Party. It would be the destruction, total and forever, for all time, of Republican politics in the United States. And I'm arguing that it was not worth that risk.
I hear you. You sound very rational, George.
Well, I think Dick Cheney is rational.
No.
I think he's wicked. I think he's evil.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the worst men ever to enter the portals of political office in the United States. But I don't think that he's a fool. I really don't.
George, just give me 1 second. I won't be long.
Go on.
This was not the intent to see a democratic government continue. And I don't put it on Republicans, nor Democrats, nor libertarians alone. If you discern that, it's not about the party. In fact, I contend that it was pretty much that our government has already been seized by a foreign state, namely Israel. And I would point out, you talk about one American being killed in the Marmara. What about when they attacked the U.S. Cole back in 1967 and killed all those naval officers?
No, the U.S. Cole was in the 1990s. The 1990s
I'm talking 67. They attacked the U.S. Navy vessel, and I believe it was the Cole.
It wasn't the U.S. Cole, no. Anyway, look, thanks for the call. 212-209-2900 is the number to call me. Aoife, do we have any women callers? We haven't had any.
Well, not so far.
Okay, women callers, please. I need a woman to call up. Otherwise, it's going to be an all-male show. Aoife, go ahead.
You have Jeff from Brewster, New York.
Hi, Jeff. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, George. Two things. One real quick. First of all, I'd like to ask the people that think it's a conspiracy, 9/11 was a conspiracy, why the United States would go to all that trouble having a really detailed, involved plan and then forget to pin it on the country that they intended to attack because of...
Good point. Yeah, good point.
Secondly, though, I'd like to, if I might...
Hello? Oh, Jeff, are you there?
The West propping up dictators
Yeah.
in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Yet you showed effusive support for Assad of Syria.
When was that?
Occasions. What?
When was that?
Your support of Assad for Syria?
Yeah, when was that?
You want me to look it up on the internet real quick? You're
No, I
denying
mean,
that you did that?
I mean, you're confident enough to come on the radio with it, so I think I'm entitled to ask you for chapter and verse. I'm entitled?
Yeah, of course. But I'm surprised that you're saying...
What was the effusive support, and when was it?
It was... Hold on.
No, I can't, come on.
Okay.
What do you want me to do? Wait till you go and consult your handlers? You've come on and made an allegation.
I got it. 2005.
In 2005.
Yes.
In 2005, 6 years ago,
right.
I made the following statement,
right.
which I made on WBAI several times in the last 6 months.
Okay.
Namely this, that the West is against Syria, not for any bad things that Syria has done, and it has done many,
right.
but for the good things that Syria has done,
right.
and it has done many. Those good things include the following: refusing to accept Israel's theft of its territory on the Golan, refusal to sign a surrender peace with Israel, like the other Arab puppet regimes, refusal to end its relationship with the Lebanese national resistance Hezbollah, refusing to expel the Palestinian resistance leadership based in Damascus, and refusing to allow its country to be used as a base camp for the attack on Iraq in 2003 and subsequently. That's my view. There's no secret about it. That was my view then, and is my view now. Now, the last thing I wrote about Syria,
right.
given you're interested in my views on Syria and you have access to the internet, was an article I wrote in AlJazeera.net last month, which is a rather more up-to-date summary of my views on Syria than a reference to 2005, don't you think?
Okay, sure.
Go ahead and check it out. Thanks very much. 212-209-2900. Aoife, where do we have?
Well, you have Muriel from Manhattan.
Finally, Muriel in Manhattan. Welcome.
Hello, George Galloway.
Hi.
I just wondered if I would call you an MP. Or...
I was for 23 years.
Yeah. All right, Mr. MP.
No, just call me George.
Okay, George. I want to thank you so much for the reference to Nixon and Chile.
Yes.
Because it's thoroughly forgotten.
It is, yeah. Matter of fact, most people in America don't even know it happened.
Right.
And it was on 9/11. It was the first 9/11.
Well, it's an atrocity for sure.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask you about, and I'll get off the phone, is the whole thing to do with Gaddafi and Libya. I have heard that Ramsey Clark, Cynthia McKinley, and other people, a man who was on Guns and Butter, if you know that program on Friday, talking about more or less a conspiracy to get rid of Gaddafi on the part of Western elements and troops on the ground. At the same time, I'm hearing about the rebels, the protests, etc., etc. So can you clarify this?
Sure, I can, Muriel, and thanks for the opportunity to do so.
Okay, I'll get off the phone.
All right, thanks, Muriel.
Okay.
The first thing I'd say is if you go to YouTube, you will see several speeches and many interviews that I've given on Libya. Just type in George Galloway plus Libya, and you will see at more length my stand on this, not just now, but many years ago, long before this rebellion began. I believe that the Libyan regime of Colonel Gaddafi was a total, shambolic, corrupt, cruel chaos. It was a state, with no institutions. In fact, it gloried in the fact that it had no parliament, no government, no president, no prime minister. But that was all just a cover for a family and tribal dictatorship which looted the country of billions of dollars and wasted much of it. Not just billions of dollars that were stolen, but were wasted. And I could, if I had more time, go through the chapter and verse. But let me just say this. Libya now has a population of 6 million people. At the time that Gaddafi came to power 42 years ago, its population was less than 4 million. Less than 4 million people to share the revenues of trillions of dollars of oil and gas over those 42 years should have left every Libyan citizen living like a Saudi prince, and should have left the public realm in Libya looking like Dubai or even Manhattan. But anyone who's ever been there, anyone who's ever looked closely, knows that neither of those two things is correct. But the Gaddafi family, quite a big family, a lot of sons, a lot of cousins, a lot of brothers, and the cronies, all grew extremely rich and extremely fat, living on the wealth of the Libyan people. Now, I don't think there needed to be a conspiracy. The rebels in Benghazi had been waiting for decades for their opportunity. The people of Benghazi, the eastern part of Libya, had long wanted to overthrow Colonel Gaddafi, and Western intelligence agencies, including the British and the American, had long tried to help them to do so, giving them money and logistical support for attempts at assassination and so on against Gaddafi. Because Gaddafi was, for most of the 42 years, a thorn in the flesh of Western governments. And then, after 2003, Gaddafi threw his lot in with the imperialist powers. He rolled over and cried, Uncle. Uncle Sam and Uncle John Bull, and indeed even Uncle Berlusconi, if you can imagine anything more horrendous than that. You've got a better imagination than me. He rolled over. He asked these Western governments and Western companies to come and have their way with Libya and its wealth. And Libya began to transform along entirely normal capitalist dictatorship lines. And when they rose up on the example of the revolutions in Egypt and in Tunisia, Gaddafi moved with full military might to smash the rebellion. And it quickly became a militarized conflict. Are you trying to get in, Muriel?
It's just the music.
Uh-huh. Are we over? Is it over, Ife?
You have 1 minute.
It's over so briefly, my goodness. I was just getting into my stride, just about to move to the second phase of what's going to happen in Libya. You'll have to tune in next week, God willing, if you want to hear the rest of that story. My apologies for the mishandling of the ending here. It's a long way from London to New York City. However, I wish I was there with you, and who knows, maybe later this year I will be. God willing, I'll see you again next week at the same time and the same place on WBAI.org if you're listening internationally, WBAI 99.5 FM if you're listening on the radio. Don't forget, go to George Galloway MP on Facebook, and you can find everything that I'm doing if you're interested. I hope you are, and I hope to talk to you again next week.
Every hour of the day, you will hear me say, baby, won't you please come on, I need some loving.